Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember the eyes bulging.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yes, yes, I remember because I was going to read this verse last time, but we ran out of time.
Well, then it's Krishna's arrangement that you get to read it tonight at the beginning.
Jai. All right. Well, how about I have my wife here for kirtan if wanted.
Lovely,
Definitely.
yes.
All right, Ananda, your go. Krishna, Krishna.
Is it possible to get a camera on you, or I'll do the darshan from Vrindavan? There we go. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramamsa Parivrajakaacharya Sotra Shata Shrishima Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramamsa Parivrajakaacharya Sotra Shata Shrishima Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem se ko Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktavinda Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. And my obeisances to all of you. All right. Welcome everyone for our continued reading. We're going to continue with our third canto study, and I'll begin. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. I think it's interesting that we have to toggle our settings to original sound. It's like Zoom wasn't meant for kirtan, or at least it facilitates it if you toggle the sound settings. All right. Text 16, 3:30:16. Vayunot kramatottar kapasangrudhanardika kasa shvasa kritayasa kante ghura ghurayate. Some onomatopoeia happening. In that diseased condition, one's eyes bulge due to the pressure of air from within, and his glands become congested with mucus. He has difficulty breathing, and upon exhaling and inhaling, he produces a sound like ghura ghura, a rattling within the throat. This is the position of someone remaining at home and entering into decrepitude within the confines of continued desire to remain at home and not release his attachment for home life. All right. Shayana parishochadbhi parivita svabandhubhi vachyamano pinabrute kalapasha vashamgata. In this way he comes under the clutches of death and lies down, surrounded by lamenting friends and relatives, and although he wants to speak with them, he no longer can because he is under the control of time. Purport. For formality's sake, when a man is lying on his deathbed, his relatives come to him and sometimes they cry very loudly, addressing the dying man, "Oh my father, oh my friend," or "Oh my husband." In that pitiable condition, the dying man wants to speak with them and instruct them of his desires. But because he is fully under the control of the time factor, death, he cannot express himself, and that causes him inconceivable pain. He is already in a painful condition because of disease, and his glands and throat are choked up with mucus. He is already in a very difficult position, and when he is addressed by his relatives in that way, his grief increases. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Gurudasa Jayadvaita Swami Niti Namani. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namani. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalake Chakshurun Militam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Jutapatakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamsha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhi Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevcha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I have a couple small thoughts, and then I'd like to present it for all of you to add something. The first verse describing the diseased condition, which there's various lakshana, various symptoms presented for this condition of decrepitude. And it kind of reminded me of the perverse reflection of Shikshashtaka, in which it's describing various bodily symptoms. Nayanam galada shudare. When will my eyes be filled with tears? And when will my voice choke up? Gadgada. So here we have Ghura Ghurayate. And Mahaprabhu is saying Gadgada. And it also has that quality of onomatopoeia, that your voice is choking up. But one is out of love for Krishna, and the other is from the bile and mucus blocking one's throat. So we sort of have a choice. In this material world, you're given a vehicle, tadap yadhruvam artadam, that although impermanent, although filled with so many material inebrieties, maybe Srila Prabhupada would say, it has artadam, has great value as a boat that can help us cross over this material existence under the instructions of our spiritual masters. So that body has two options. It's going to cough. It is going to make this sound, gura gura or gadgada. We just choose whether it's in love or in death. The cat is taking the rat and the kitten in its sharp jaws, but one is experiencing it one way and the other is experiencing it another way. So if we have this choice, that your throat will block up, now it's whether in devotion to Krishna or in the throes of death. And so in the next verse, the man is laying down and lamenting. And I love in the word for word, pasha, often translated as rope. Srila Prabhupada has here as the noose. So the person is under the control of the noose of time. One gets this image of a gradual tightening. It's being cinched in. For many years I wrestled. I loved jujitsu. And there's a feeling of helplessness when someone's superior to you, or even of maybe not superior to you, but they somehow or other manage to get a hold in. And if they slip in a choke and it's around your neck, and you just feel that gradual tightening, and there's a sort of helplessness that one feels, where there's nothing you can do, it's just a matter of time. So the noose of time is cinching in, and it's squeezing harder and harder. And unlike jujitsu, there's no opportunity to pull the arm off and escape. You're going to die. You feel it. It's coming closer and closer. And in that position, still one is beset by material desires. How helpless, how frustrating, how horrible. There's maybe someone can remember the details, but basically the idea presented was that one is still afflicted with sex desire up until one's dying breath. And the king couldn't believe it. And so his advisor told him, come to this man's deathbed and bring your daughter. And so when he comes to the side of the dying man's bed, the dying man didn't even have eyes for the king. He understood that this is the king, and yet he didn't even pay him attention. His eyes immediately went to the young daughter. And so the point was demonstrated that even up until the point of death, one is afflicted by sex desire. I'm just looking in the chat. Oh, okay, the verses. So that present, and here in the purport, it's describing that the people are crying out, oh my father, oh my husband, oh my, whatever it is, whatever relationship one has in living, people are holding on to that at the time of death. And it brings to mind the pastime of Hiranyakashipu consoling the wives of his brother Hiranyaksha. And he tells the story of Yamaraj coming as a child and expressing to them, you're saying, oh, my husband has left, but he's right there. He's right in front of you. So who is it that's gone? You've never even seen the person that you're lamenting the departure of. So maybe I'll open it up there. We'll hear your thoughts, comments, or move on to the next verse. Anybody have anything?
I dropped a comment in the chat.
I love that you use the word decrepitude. I use it frequently since that is my stage of life. Etymology, broken down in health, weakened, especially by age. Mid-15th century, from Old French, décrépit, from de, down, crepitus, past participle of crepare, to crack, break. Wow. The literal sense of the Latin word is uncertain, related, decrepitly, to crack, to break. So these are all things that are only within the material sphere of reference, material frame of reference. Obviously the soul doesn't crack or break. It can't be harmed by any weapon. It can't be withered by the wind. That's actually how we got the name for our first son, Maruti. It was Nashoshetu Marutaha. And I told my wife, oh, this is also a name of Hanuman, the son of the wind, Maruti. And so that's how we got his name from that verse. But these are qualities of the soul. Nashosheti Maruta. The wind can't wither the soul. It can't be broken. It can't be harmed. Akendra Prabhu comments, babies and dying men cry because they can't express their desires. That's right. So for those of us who have small children, you have a checklist. This is why the baby's crying. It has a soiled diaper, it's tired, it's hungry. That's the checklist. And if you can't understand why the child is crying, you just run down the checklist. And so we have a checklist for a dying man as well. You run down the checklist. He has unfulfilled lust. He has whatever it is in life that he cultivated, his desires. Now he's crying for those reasons. So the checklist has grown much longer. And as devotees, our hope is that we actually make that checklist much smaller, that we reduce our necessities, that your checklist be exclusive to only one box. How can I serve Krishna? How can I serve the devotees? All right, I made it 2 boxes. How can I serve Krishna? How can I serve the devotees? But the point is that exclusive sharana, that exclusive surrender to Krishna, recognizing that he is our maintainer, he is our protector. And so by making that checklist very small, when we have only one box to fill, then it simplifies matters, and then one no longer needs to see repeated birth and death. Queen Kunti is praying that way. She says, let all these calamities come. For other people, these calamities create so many more check boxes. Oh, my house is, now I need to rebuild my home. Oh, I've been kicked out into the forest. I have to live in an incognito for a year at the end of 13 years of banishment. It's really rough. How extensive could one's checklist of necessities become? But for Queen Kunti, it was still single focus. Oh, these calamities are great because I get to see Krishna again and again. And when everything is resolved and everything is perfect, she says, bring back those calamities. If we get health and prosperity, if we get all material benedictions at the cost of Krishna not being here, then give back all the troubles, because our only desire is to be with Krishna. I'm not bothered by the fact that my body is falling apart, that it's becoming decrepit, that my eyes are bulging, that my voice is choked up. Till my dying breath, I'll try to remember Krishna. Prana prayana samaye kapavata pittar. Krishna tvadiya pada pankaja panjaratram. The King Kulashekar is praying so beautifully that, you know what, at the time of death, my throat will be blocked up. I won't be able to chant. So let the royal swan of my mind be entangled in the lotus feet of Krishna now and always, at every point. Let's see, there's some more in the chat. Oh, Ananta Shesh Prabhu likes the checklist. It's really only one box, says Tulsi Priya, yeah. Praveen Krishna Prabhu says, when he is addressed by his relatives in that way, his grief increases. What about those who are dying alone? Wow. Yeah, these are interesting meditations, actually. I had this experience once when, what is Prabhuji's name? I know his daughter. I went on bus tour with her, Jonavi Harrison. Like a river to the sea, she has that song. What's her father's name? Anyway, he gave a class, and he was,
Kripamaya Prabhu.
what's his name?
Kripamaya.
Kripamoya Prabhu. Yeah, so he was giving a wonderful class. And in this class, he was describing things that happened to him more toward the age of 50 or 60. And it was a fascinating class for me because it was something beyond my experience. And yet he was giving his direct perception of what happens in these stages. And so, Praveen Krishna Prabhu, you bring up a wonderful point that's outside of my sphere of experience. And it is hard to imagine, for one dying alone with so many attachments, the sort of torture that must be there. But as you said last class, Praveen Krishna Prabhu, your friend was stating with some pride that his grandfather left without anybody knowing where he was. And imagine the relief of dying alone in that way, where you're so renounced. So yeah, I can't speak directly to the experience of one dying alone, but I can imagine even without people crying out by your side, oh my husband, oh my son, it must be similarly torturous within your own mind. How many desires you have unfulfilled, how much you're holding on to, and calling you back to another birth, and hopefully not a much worse birth. All right, I've spoken quite a bit. Who else do we have for here? Tulsi Priyamata says, I would imagine that if you are dying alone, you are either deeply in the mode of ignorance or you are detached. Well, we had a neighbor up the street. He was an older man. He definitely wasn't detached because his house was a clutter. And he had at various times different relatives, but most of his relatives passed away, and he had one romantic relationship, and somehow that had, for one reason or another, he ended up dying alone. But his house was quite cluttered with belongings, and I would imagine that he wasn't dying the death of one in great renunciation.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, you hear about bums dying on the street alone, so they're so deeply in the mode that they've lost all of, in other words, attachments are in the mode of passion, for the most part, family attachments and home and position in life. So that means you're in the mode of passion. So if you don't have that, and I'm not saying this is an absolute statement, but it just seems that, if you look at people who die alone, either they've just lost everything because of their mode of ignorance, they're hooked on drugs or alcohol or whatever, and they die alone in the street or in some flop house somewhere, or else they're very detached to people, like Prabhu was saying about the grandfather. He went off somewhere, and who knows how he ended up, but he was detached. So he probably died alone, or if he did die with somebody, it was to his spiritual, to aid him spiritually somehow, but it wasn't an attachment.
Yeah, and I know Srila Prabhupada praised the hippies, if for nothing else, then at least, hey, they're a little detached.
Mhm.
They've left their positions of opulence. They've given up something.
Yeah.
There's something commendable there. but we have aspirations set at a much higher bar.
Yes.
We have this. We've been given this direction, how to gear our lives in such a way. Was it in our online sangha, or maybe it was in my local classes at our temple here? But someone was quoting "Yena tena prakarena manakrishna niveshe," or "Tasmat kena apyupayena," depending on where you find the verse. But yeah, somehow or other, make your life in such a way that Krishna consciousness is the ideal, and then your renunciation or your attachment will both be glorious. When Krishna is put at the center, then Kendra Prabhu says, Saraswati Mata's hand is up. I'm sorry, I don't see hands because on my phone it's difficult to scroll back to the list of participants and see hands, but please, Saraswati Mata.
Pranams to all. I was just thinking this first sentence saying for formality's sake, and that word is so apt because out of social etiquette or civility, relatives may feel that they're pushed to make this exhibition, this show of heartbreak at the impending death of an elderly relative, while in truth, secretly, they're probably relieved at the passing away of this elderly person that they may have seen as a burden. And I know of a family in India that actually they have these professional mourners, they're called Rudali, that they rent. And I know of a family that rented this person to come and mourn in order to inflate the popularity of the relative that had passed away. But even if the grief is real and authentic, it still, is of no permanent value because the entire relationship in itself is an illusion. It's temporary. But it does, however, indicate and speak of a craving that the natural craving that the conditional all souls actually have in order to connect and bond with someone through service, through care. It's just that it's entirely misplaced with conditional souls because instead of placing it and serving Krishna, it's just entirely misplaced with these temporary relationships. But it still speaks of this natural desire and that craving that we have to connect with someone through service. And of course, we know Krishna is the only object of love. Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much, Saraswati Devi, for that. I really appreciate that, pointing out that word formality, that actually, as a formality, we're lamenting, but really we're relieved. And sometimes we don't even have to bring this to the absolute platform of death, but even on the platform of, you have a visitor, and at some point it becomes a burden when the topic of discussion isn't Christian conscious. When things get too far from Krishna, then sometimes we start to feel exhausted with someone's company, or we start to feel exhausted with some particular venue or some activity you're doing. It can only last so long. The example given, you can only chant, Coca-Cola so many times before it's exhausting. But you can chant Hare Krishna indefinitely and experience newer and newer pleasure. How many times can you watch the same movie or eat this same restaurant food? At some point it dulls, it becomes an austerity. And so similarly, how long can you take care of the broken body of a relative who's no longer functioning in any sort of reciprocatory capacity? And of course, as devotees, when a senior Vaishnava is there, then we desire their sangha. They have something to offer well into their old age. But just in general dealings, as you said, it becomes a formality. The grief is a formality. Very, very nice point. Thank you. And a couple of pithy statements from Ananta Shesh Prabhu. Detachment dovetailed to attachment to Krishna. Beautiful. Detachment without attachment to Krishna is sense gratification. Thank you, Ananta Shesh Prabhu. And Tulsi Priyamata says, if anyone would like to speak, rather than use the raise hand feature, you could type question or comment into the chat box. If that's not possible, I'll keep an eye out for raised hands. Thank you, Tulsi Priyamata. Would someone like to read? I know Ekendra Prabhu is really good at delegating readers, but I'm not quite as familiar with everyone we have here. And also, I want to apologize for my scruffy appearance. My spiritual master has chastised me many times for growing any facial hair. I broke both my feet a couple months ago, so movement around the house has become very difficult for me, so that's my excuse anyway. I know we shouldn't have any excuses. There are people in more difficult positions who maintain proper etiquette and decorum. But anyway, that's my excuse, and I'm sticking with it. All right. Tulsi Priya says she can read. Please.
Are we on 17? Or
We
no,
are
18.
the next verse after, yeah, 18.
Okay. Evam kutumba baharane vyapritatma jitendriya mriyate hrudatam swanam uruvedana yastadhi. Thus the man who engaged with uncontrolled senses in maintaining a family dies in great grief, seeing his relatives crying. He dies most pathetically, in great pain, and without consciousness. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita, it is said that at the time of death, one will be absorbed in the thoughts which he cultivated during his lifetime. A person who had no other idea than to properly maintain his family members must have family affairs in his last thoughts. That is the natural sequence for a common man. The common man does not know the destiny of his life. He is simply busy in his flash of life, maintaining his family. At the last stage, no one is satisfied with how he has improved the family economic condition. Everyone thinks that he could not provide sufficiently. Because of his deep family affection, he forgets his main duty of controlling the senses and improving his spiritual consciousness. Sometimes a dying man entrusts the family affairs to either his son or some relative, saying, I am going, please look after the family. He does not know where he is going, but even at the time of death, he is anxious about how his family will be maintained. Sometimes it is seen that a dying man requests the physician to increase his life, at least for a few years, so that the family maintenance plan which he has begun can be completed. These are the material diseases of the conditioned soul. He completely forgets his real engagement to become Krishna conscious and is always serious about planning to maintain his family, although he changes families one after another. Om Jnanatimandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So this comes across as very heavy. You want to maintain your family, but it's not possible. Whatever you do is not enough, and you just you never feel at peace about it. I think there are some people that may feel some confidence that they have done everything that they can, but we have seen that sometimes somebody can amass a huge fortune and leave it to the family, and within 1 or 2 generations that fortune is gone because the successors, the heirs, don't know how to maintain that fortune. They just, because they got it easily, they get rid of it easily. They spend it, they waste it, and within very little time, the family is poor, even though the grandsire or the father or the patriarch or whoever may have amassed the fortune from being poor himself, and amassed a huge fortune and became fabulously wealthy, and by his own hard work. But usually, there's a saying, easy come, easy go. So we also hear now about people who are extremely wealthy who, what's that phrase, die with nothing. And they also don't leave their children a lot of money. Of course, the children are set up in life just from being the child of a wealthy person. But the idea is, some people have started to think, oh, let me not leave all this money to my child. I've helped them enough throughout their life. They were born wealthy. They've had every advantage. Let them fend for themselves. So I don't know, what the reasoning, what the source of that reasoning is, where it comes from, because it's not typical in today's day and age. But I have read a lot of about people saying creating generational wealth. But the fact is that generally the generational wealth does not last very long, because whatever one achieves easily tends to be lost easily. And so it's an anxiety, because usually people who are very wealthy, they have this idea of dynasty and their name living on after them, and so on and so forth. So you think you're creating a dynasty, but really you're just creating the conditions for your uh, children to become dissolute and spend their money on nonsense, and waste their lives on drugs and alcohol, and become disgraced. It happens more frequently than we think, but still everybody's got the desire that, oh, I want to have generational wealth. I want my children to have an easier life. But it usually doesn't work out that way. It usually doesn't work out that way. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Any other comments from the other devotees about this verse and purport? I had a couple thoughts until somebody else has something. I just pulled out my spiritual master's book, Vanity Karma, and one of the verses talks about wisdom is good as an inheritance. This is one of the lines in Ecclesiastes. Wisdom is good with an inheritance. And in Maharaj's commentary, he cites from several different sources about different ways to read that. To read whether wisdom itself is a good inheritance, or with an inheritance, if you get wisdom, then you have the ability to pursue wisdom because you're financially well off. And so naturally we think of, verses like Shuchinam Shumatam Gehe, that you're given maybe a foot up in your endeavors for Christian consciousness. So that's sort of our motivation is kind of on the same topic as we were discussing before. But whatever facilities you have, whether in health or in decrepitude, or whether in wisdom or in ignorance, whether in old age or young age, to find a way to make Krishna paramount, then success can be there. Otherwise, whether you have a big inheritance or no inheritance, if you don't take advantage of the opportunities given to you, then it's squandered, then it's wasted, an opportunity lost. If
I
there are
had
no
another,
other,
I had
oh, go
another
ahead.
comment. Oh,
Yeah.
Saraswati has a comment.
Please, Saraswati Devi.
Yes, I was just going to add that Srila Prabhupada said that it's easier for a man, especially in Kali Yuga, rather it's easier to maintain a great empire than a small family, especially in Kali Yuga. And we know that there's some conditional souls, in order to maintain the family, they, whether by hook or crook, there's no scruples. They'll do anything in order to maintain their family. And here it's clearly said that despite their best attempt, and despite taking on so much sin in order to maintain their family, no one's happy at the end of the day. They feel that that the person hasn't really done enough for them. And we see this in families too, where the children, especially in rich families, they think, oh well, there's all this resentment because they feel that the father or the mother, they spent their entire time pursuing economic development rather than spend quality time with them. So regardless, there's always some resentment. No one's happy at the end of the day, no matter how much the parent may have thrown themselves into a life of trying to maintain them. And also, I heard from it was some saint from another sampradaya. I don't even think it was actually one of the four Vaishnava sampradayas, but at any rate, their advice to the elderly members of a family were that do not give away your inheritance while you're alive, because you can dangle that like a carrot in front of your children, so that they won't abandon you, or that they'll feel that you're still relevant in order to get that inheritance. So the advice was, don't give anything away until you've died. While you're living, let them run around you with the greed of inheriting, so that they won't be overlooked. They'll still, even if it's artificial, remain relevant in the child's life. But I'm just thinking it's so ridiculous in one sense, because sometimes the person that's dying, they know inside, deep in their heart, that whatever affection may have been shown or is being shown, it's artificial, and yet they just can't seem to disconnect themselves from this illusory family. They're so immersed into thinking that they're the maintainer, and that without them everything will crumble. It's just so hard, and even as devotees, for us to sometimes really be convinced that Krishna is actually our maintainer, the maintainer of everyone. Sometimes it's theoretically we may know, but it could be a little bit hard to actually apply that and put it into practice. Hare Krishna.
Ananta Shesh Prabhu likes your comment about dangling the money in front, and I appreciate what you said after that as well. That although you understand that the relationship is based on that, still you might leverage it. So the relationship is already kind of, if your relationship with someone is dependent upon money, then it's already a superficial relationship, and yet you want to continue that relationship. Because you have benefits as well. They're benefited by the money, and you're benefited by the company and possibly the physical care. So it's all mutual sense gratification, in other words. So yeah, Krishna as the maintainer relieves us of this burden of substandard interactions, interactions devoid of real love. And then Tulsi Priyamata has another comment, please.
Yes. This is something that I've been thinking for many years when I first started associating with devotees in ISKCON, and for the first time in my life, really getting to know Indian families, who, typically are rather pious. They may have their problems like every other family, but, they come to the temple and they want to have that in their culture. And I remember thinking, everybody I knew was like the parents were from India, and maybe the children were born in India, but then they came to the US. And then later on, you have parents coming from India and the children are born in the United States. And I was thinking, this is going to be like every other immigrant group that comes to the United States. The first immigrant group comes and they're working hard, and the children, everybody's learning English and learning, of course, Indians know English, but, they're working hard and they're trying to make it so that everybody keeps on their good behavior and is trying to succeed. It's mode of passion. And then in the second generation, the children born in the US, they become more Americanized, and you see a little bit more difficulties, that there's a clash between the culture of the parents and the children in the Western culture. And then you have the third generation, and the children are completely Westernized and they give up the culture of their family. And you start to see, and I'm not talking about Indians now so much because I really don't know, but you've seen it in the culture of the Italians, the Irish, the Chinese, this, that, the other thing. And they become more, subject to the influences. And so you see more drug addiction, more bad behavior in general, things like that. And so I was thinking, at least in ISKCON, we have this process by which, it's a completely mundane consideration in a way, but somebody who takes to Krishna consciousness, if they really take to it, even if they don't succeed, at least they don't become degraded. They may become just pious materialists, but they don't become degraded. And I was thinking about this because there's the story in the news about this young woman, degree in neuroscience, and she became ideologically captured by some political group. And she went went to the city council in Bakersfield, California, and threatened the city council literally with murder. She says, "We will come to your house and murder you." And she's there with it, salwar kameez on, and looking like any girl would show up in an ISKCON temple. She was 28 years old, degree in neuroscience, and now she's facing 18 felony counts. And I'm thinking, did this girl ever have any contact with ISKCON? Did she ever have any concept of serving Krishna, or not this body or whatever? It just seems like such a radical fall from what we consider typical high achieving pious Indian families. But that, what I'm trying to say is that will not stand if there's no spiritual foundation under it. You know, it's so easy to lose one's position when you're subject to bad influences all around you. So I'm just bringing that up as sort of a cautionary tale, that we need to preach, because it's the only thing that can save us, really, ultimately. Even if we're not perfectly situated in Krishna consciousness, it'll keep us from being completely degraded. All right, Krishna.
Thank you. Ananta Shesh Prabhu comments on that. Right on point, Mataji. We were worried about the next generation, but Prabhupada and ISKCON saved us. Otherwise, it would be a losing battle. Every immigrant family faces the same situation. I had a similar experience. I was the spokesperson of our Hindu club in high school. That's just what the club had to be named to establish it, but of course I was trying to spread knowledge of Sanatan Dharma. But we had one boy in our Hindu club named Krishna, who was a very nice-looking Indian boy. His name is Krishna, but we all were chastising him because he would go to the lunchroom and eat abominable things. So yeah, so the immigrant family, they have all of this background, but that's the power. That's the power of association of these distracting elements, that you can have all the facilities. And it's the same thing when you were mentioning the inheritance after reading the verse and purport. I had that thought from Vanity Karma, that if you have the inheritance but no wisdom to utilize it, when you don't have that direction, then it's useless. And on the flip side, if you have none of the good heritage, if you're a dog eater, Stri Shudra Dvijabandhunam, but if you know the science of Krishna, then you're a guru. So it's quite wonderful, the extremes that apply to devotional service, that without that missing ingredient, without Krishna, then whatever your position, high family or low family or whatever it is, it's all abominable. And then we have a comment from Saraswati Devi. Karmi parents may not outwardly acknowledge it, but they know their devotee child has good qualities like respect, compassion, and care for everyone.
I
Should we
just
move
made
on?
that comment because you said about wisdom, and I thought, yeah, that's required. It's not enough to just have an inheritance or a position, a family name. You have to have wisdom, and of course, the only real wisdom is devotional service, Krishna consciousness.
That's a nice point too. Yeah, actually, that's discussed also later on in the discussion. My Guru Maharaj points out that Kohelet might even be hinting that wisdom as an inheritance is also useless if compared to material assets. Even the more subtle aspects like wisdom, it can be similarly fruitless. If your wisdom is not guided toward, absolute realization of the self in relationship with God, then what kind of wisdom is it? So yeah, we have a very sort of black and white understanding of all of these interactions, money and wealth, everything. It's very black and white. If it's not with Krishna, then it's demonic. If it's in line with Krishna's desires and preaching activities, then it's divine. It's very polarized. Shall we move to the next verse? Do we have any volunteer readers for text, what is this, 19? No volunteers. All right, we're going to have to start calling names. I know Praveen Krishna Prabhu can't, he doesn't have a working microphone, I believe. Who can we nominate? Krishna Kaunteya Prabhu, are you a reader? Danikeli Mata, are you a reader? Available? Ananta Shesh Prabhu? Praveen Krishna Prabhu is near devotees doing japa.
I nominate
Murari?
Priyanka Mataji, and if she doesn't want to do it, I'll read. Or if somebody else doesn't want to do it, if nobody else wants to do it, I'll read again.
All right, who did you nominate?
Priyanka Mataji?
Priyanka Mata, are you available?
Yes, no perception. Text 19. Prabhuji, is it text number 19?
Yes, 19.
यं दूतो तदा प्राप्तो भीमौ सर्वसेक्षणौ स दृष्ट्वा त्रस्तहृदया शक्तिन्मुद्रं विमुञ्चते. At death, he sees the messengers of the Lord of Death come before him, their eyes full of dread, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. There are two kinds of transmigration of a living entity after passing away from the present body. One kind of transmigration is to go to the controller of sinful activities, who is known as Yamraj, and the other is to go to the higher planets up to Vaikuntha. Here Lord Kapila describes how persons engaged in activities of sense gratification to maintain a family are treated by the messengers of Yamraj, called Yamdutas. At the time of death, the Yamdutas become the custodians of those persons who have strongly gratified their senses. They take charge of the dying man and take him to the planet where Yamraj resides. The conditions there are described in the following verses. I don't have anything to comment for this verse. Hare Krishna.
Any comments from anybody else on this verse and purport?
So I had a question. So if someone is, I guess I'm never sure about the exact sequence of events once a person dies, especially if they have been practicing devotional service, however imperfectly. So if a devotee dies, or someone aspiring to be a devotee dies, ordinarily they would not be subject to Yamaraj's ministrations.
Trayate mahato bhayat. Yeah, someone who's made any kind of advancement, even very little, is delivered from this greatest fear, which sometimes Srila Prabhupada says is transference to a lower birth, and sometimes is this meeting with the Yamadutas. But yeah, it's a greatly fearful condition that devotees are exempt from by their good fortune, by the fortune of the
Now,
spiritual.
yeah. Now that you said that, I seem to recall that if somebody is going to take birth in a lower species, they still go to Yamaraj first, because all their punishments sort of prepare them for taking birth as an animal.
Yeah, I've heard different descriptions, specifically for the pig body. I remember my grandma used to tell me that the person is subjected to eating stool until they're able to distinguish, until they cry out, "Give me the dry stool, not the wet stool." And when they make that distinguishment, then they're ready for their pig body.
Oh my
Although I
God.
have no Shastric reference for that, I was told that once the person distinguishes between the dry and the wet, that one is preferable to the other. Then they're ready.
That's
Um,
alarmingly specific.
yeah, it's quite horrific. But in any case, I don't have Shastrik Pramana for that. That was just something I was told as a child. But yeah, so in any case, the devotees are free from that. Praveen Krishnapur wants to know if he's able to see Yamaraj even with his human eyes, or otherwise, what would it be, Praveen Krishnapur? Some sort of Dadami Te, what is that? Give you divine vision? You have some sort of, in any case, whether it's with your current eyes, or some sort of special eyes to be granted such a vision, somehow or other, you're seeing Yamaraj. And Saraswati Mata says, are those that neglect to maintain their family also taken by the Yamadutas? Well, I think, in Hawaii we do online classes. We have a sangha. It's actually open to anyone, but it's mostly Hawaii contingent. And we're in the section of a Jamil, and right before that is the section in the fifth canto that goes deeply over who is destined for these various hellish conditions. So I think that discussion could probably be put off, or someone can look up those references, who is subject to be taken by Yamaraj, and whether neglecting family maintenance falls into at least one of the categories discussed in the fifth canto. But I'm not sure off the top of my head if someone wants to do that research in the fifth canto. And as for Praveen Krishna Prabhu's question also, I don't know if anybody has pramana for that, whether one needs special vision or just by dint of being taken by the Yamadutas to the council of Yamaraj, whether that in and of itself facilitates one with that vision. And then we have from Priyanka Mata, also do people who perform devotional service but not with pure motive and who are involved in some abominable activities like harming other devotees will also see the Yamadutas. Well, that brings up a very interesting, abominable activities is one thing, but you've specifically mentioned harming other devotees, which falls into the category of, Vaishnava aparad is a particularly heinous crime, so that might have implications that push one over the what would one call it, the ability to be free from meeting the Yamadutas. I don't know the answers to those questions. I suggest we don't find out. My suggestion would be to avoid harming devotees and avoid abominable activities. Ananta Sheshpur says, my son has witnessed in a cath lab a dying person crying out in fear, help me. And Praveen Krishnapur on the topic of his seeing Yamaraj, because others can't see Yamaraj, seems Yamaraj can choose who can see him. That seems right to me. And Tulsi Priyamata says, it's all via the subtle body, is it not? I've also read that the punishments are perceived to last for millions of years, but in reality only moments have passed because it's happening to the subtle body. Sorry I've read through these all so quickly, it's just we're nearing the time limit, so I didn't open up each of these topics to discussion. But if any of these particular topics, the ability to interact with Yamaraj, whether or not people in devotional service, even if it's not with pure motive, are subject to meeting the Yamadutas, and any of these other topics, perhaps they can be revisited in next class, if anybody would like to pursue these topics further. And also Saraswati Mata's comment about maintaining the family, whether that we can see if someone can find that in the fifth canto, if that's one of the things. But otherwise, I think we've reached our time, and we can end the class with some kirtan, if that's all right with everybody. Any volunteers for kirtan? Guru Das Prabhu, you have your camera up. Perhaps you're ready to sing some kirtan as well. If you would like. I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Sure you're not.
Thank you, Prabhu, for being so amenable.
My obeisances to my Guru Maharaj, to Srila Prabhupada, and to the devotees, and to Maharaj. Yes, he doesn't appear to be here. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Gauranitai, 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 Jaya Gauranitai. Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivajak Acharya Astota Sasasi Shimad. His Divine Grace Shilesi Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayom Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivajak Acharya Stotara Stotashi Shriman. His Divine Grace Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shanmakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai, Shri Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai, Shri Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai, Shri Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Shri Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande Hari Bo. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories, all glories, all glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the kirtan, and thank you, Akendra Prabhu and Tulsi Premata, for allowing me to guide the discussion, albeit with all my flaws. And thank you all for being here for this transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. As my spiritual master said a couple of classes ago, what is a day without Srimad Bhagavatam? How horrible it would be. So, thank you all for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for leading, and please make sure your wife knows that we appreciate her kirtan. And Murai Gupta in the chat has specifically thanked you and all the assembled devotees. Jai Srila Prabhupada, Gaur Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol!
Hari Bol.
Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.